You know, in our ancient Vedic Hindu Vedantic tradition, all important events and ceremonies, any spiritual activity will always begin with a symbolic presentation of Omkara in the form of blowing the gong. So I would request Steve Satyavan Krolik to come here and perform that auspicious ceremony, which is normally what we do just the beginning of any important discussion. After praying to God, we do this. Please.
The first sound will be to welcome divinity and all the great souls that are here today. The second sound will be for self-liberation and inner freedom. The third sound will be for Mahadevi, all women and all children. Thank you.
Once again, we're very happy to be able to welcome you all here. This is the high point, you could say, of our liturgical year as far as the Vedanta Society is concerned. The whole society and many of its members have put in tremendous effort and tremendous dedication to make these facilities ready for this day, and to be able to welcome you all here. This is customary to say a few words about this retreat before introducing the speakers. This retreat is a part of the Vedanta Society of Northern California, which is a branch of the Ramakrishna Mission of India. The society was founded by Swami Vivekananda in 1900, Swami Vivekananda being the prime exponent of the philosophy of Vedanta that came to the West for the Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. And he founded this society when he came to San Francisco on his second trip to the West in 1900. So we've been here a long time, and we have attempted to remain totally dedicated to that great idea, which is embodied in the motto of the order, Atmano Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya Cha, Atmana for the Atman Moksha, for the liberation of one's own self, Jagat Hita, for the welfare of all of humanity. So this is the ideal which we try to put into practice, and which is symbolized by our retreat here, where we welcome all spiritual seekers for periods of meditation and spiritual practice, each in their own way, to deepen their relationship with that infinite reality which we are trying to perceive and to realize. So this is our dedication, and as part of this, we have this interfaith religious festival every year on this Memorial Day weekend. So we welcome you all very much to that.
What I'm going to recite is a very ancient Sanskrit verse which focuses on interfaith, interspirituality and inter-religious dialogue. Yam Shaiva Samupasade Shivaidi Brahmedi Vedantino Bauddha Buddhaidi Pramana Patava Kartedi Nayayikaha Arkan Nityada Jaina Shasanarataha Karmeti Mimamsakaha Soyam no Vidadhadu Vanchita Phalam Trailokyanatho Hari. May the Lord of the universe, the remover of evil, whom the devotees of Shiva worship as Shiva, Vedantins as Brahman, Buddhists as Buddha, and the followers of different religions as their chosen deity and their chosen spiritual ideal. Let that Almighty, omnipresent, immanent spiritual reality grant us all our hearty spiritual desires and fulfillment. It's a very ancient verse that belongs to the 2nd century AD. You know what it says? In fact, this is the right beginning for any kind of interfaith dialogue. God is one. You can pray in your way, I can pray in my way. If your way of praying or approaching God is different from mine, it doesn't mean that you are wrong, that I'm right. It only means you approach God from a different perspective, from a different angle. If you are sincere and honest, you reach the same spiritual destination which I reach when I approach God with the same degree of sincere, honest and dedicated aspiration. That's the essence of this verse. So before going further, I shall just say a few words, then I would invite Swami Veetamohananda ji to give his presentation. You know, whenever you talk about the religion or faith systems, it's a big paradox. On the one hand, religion is supposed to be a unifying, harmonizing spiritual ideal. There are many sublime aspects about religion. It has enriched art, literature, civilizations, culture, everything. But at the same time, there are many undesirable things associated with religion. Some of the bloodiest battles and wars in the world history have been fought for God and on behalf of religions. So it's a big paradox, conflict. So that's what we are going to discuss today. The reason why religion is often a divisive force, taking people away from each other, creating division and conflict. The reason is we focus on the non-essential, the secondary aspects of scriptures, forgetting the universal, the unifying, the harmonizing spiritual teachings. What we do, we focus on the secondary details and fight in the name of God. So we bring God to our level. If we are evil, if we are jealous, if we are prone to fighting with others, then we conceive of God as a mighty warrior who is ready to fight on our side against our enemies. So Vedanta presents a different concept of God. Vedanta tells you that when you reach your highest spiritual evolution, you realize and you experience the presence of God in our own hearts and the presence of the same God as the omnipresent divine reality everywhere. So that makes you love your neighbor, not because you are afraid of God, but because by loving your neighbor, you are loving yourself. By hurting your neighbor or hurting another person, we are spiritually hurting ourselves. So this concept of spiritual unity and oneness of existence, looking upon the whole humanity, the whole creation as one spiritual family, is the essence of Vedantic concept of interfaith. So, to begin with, I request Swami Veetamohananda ji Maharaj to come and give his presentation. He will speak elaborately on interfaith movements, the recent trends in interfaith conversations in Europe. He has been closely associated with this sublime concept of interfaith unity all over Europe. So I request Swamiji to come and give his presentation. Thank you. Namaskar.
My dear monastic brothers, religious personalities, spiritual aspirants, I have very important news to share with you. First, I will begin with the hot news. You will be surprised what it is. On the 24th of this month, just before my departure to this country, I was invited by a group of interfaith organization to be present with them whole day. I knew them since long time. I used to be one of their members. I could not refuse. In the meantime, another invitation came from the UNESCO saying that you must be present at least for the part of the program. So I had to divide myself with the two invitations. In the morning I went to the Christian Convent organized by the Benedictines. So we had a subject to reflect upon. It was compassion. Amongst us, there were Buddhists, there were Sufis, there were Catholics, Protestants, perfectly all right. We were in perfect harmony, in perfect understanding. So we tried to reflect upon the subject, what is called the compassion. Compassion is common to all religious traditions. Buddhists, though they give more importance to compassion of Buddha, the Indian traditions also give more importance to Daya. Christianity also is the same thing. In Islam also it is the same thing. So this discussion went on. Of course, I was the last person to speak or express myself. Perfectly all right for me. So how to express the compassion? The compassion generally as known to our people is to express the compassion externally. Forgetting we need to express compassion to ourselves. Without that expression or understanding, comprehension, however much we may express ourselves externally, it won't work out. That is why we find a lot of divisions, lot of conflicts, lot of problems everywhere. Well then, you may question how this compassion can be expressed inwardly. First of all, are we aware of ourselves? How much of agitation goes on within ourselves? Do we know as how we are to master ourselves? As how to transform this agitation, inner agitation, and conserve the energy and utilize the energy for the progressive life? So, what is called religion, it is science of life. So, we came to this acceptance, yes, religion, what is called religion, it is the science of life. If it is the science of life, we may use any analytical method, perfectly all right. So, the method that is employed is perfectly right for individual. It depends upon the individual capacity, temperament, need. You have to respect. We accept it. So there is no conflict. Well then, the next point comes as how can we master ourselves. There are different methods suggested by the scriptures, by the religious traditions. Now these different methods, are they contradictory? Not at all. I may call my method as meditation or repetition of holy names. The same thing is there in Christianity also, contemplation. Catholics also repeat a mantra, you know it very well. Then the singing of songs or devotion, what you may call prayer, perfectly right. Muslims also do the same thing. But where is the problem? So this is how we go deep into the aspects of practice, everyday practice, first for ourselves. Then we have to be ideal for others. That is why Swami Veerakananda said, be and make. So this is what we practice in our groups. So I mentioned the convent where I went. We are associated since a long time, maybe 25 years or more. So we didn't, until today, we didn't have any kind of conflict because we don't touch the what is called superficial aspects of religion. We just take essentials of life and try to reflect on it and reflect as how to apply them in our everyday life. So by doing it, we don't come to any kind of conflict. We are able to understand each other. So this is how the morning session came to an end. Of course, they continued afternoon session also. When I came to UNESCO, there was a panel of discussion. There was a moderator. Of course, he, asked questions according to his understanding. First question was addressed to the Christian priest. Why is it so much of difference amongst the religions? Why there are fights, conflicts? And he cited the example of Burma, Rohingya problem and all that. The priest said, I am not going to enter into it because UNESCO does not deal with the religious aspects of life. UNESCO gives the importance to the culture, research, education and all that, perfectly right. So he did not want to comment on that particular problem. Then there was a pastor, Protestant. He also said, no, perhaps we should not get into such problems because these type of problems are created not by the religious people. Maybe there may be fanatics. It is not our problem. And for us, the values are important. If values are important, then we need to know as how to apply them in our everyday life. So my turn came. He asked me, Swami, what do you say for all this? Yes, the conflicts in the name of religion is not created by the religion. Religion does not demand that you have to create this problem. Or religion does not demand you have to follow this only, otherwise you are condemned to hell. No, never. Such demand is demanded by the religion. And as I know it, we are to accept only the values. We need to know as how to apply them in our everyday life. If our everyday life becomes progressive, automatically there is peace, there is harmony. So, you see how the heart brings us all together, gives us the right understanding. So, here, when the hearts are united, there is no room for any kind of problem, difficulties. And then, I give another example. These Christian monks of different monasteries and nuns, they told me, Swami, you would like to visit India. Can you do something for it? That I asked, yes, certainly. So I accompanied them 2 times. First visit was, I don't remember the year, we went northern part of India, right from Haridwar or Rishikesh, right up to Benares, Saranath, then came to Belur Math, our headquarters. All the way, everywhere, they stayed in our ashramas. They were looked after like one of us. They were very happy. So, where comes here any problem? This, our relationship, our understanding continues even up to today. See, in the religious life, what's called this heart is an important factor which is emphasized both by Buddha, Jesus, and all other great personalities. So with it, there is no conflict, no problem. We all can live together without any kind of difference, distinction of color or race or whatever it is. Thank you all. Thank
you. Barbara O'Brien. She is a lifelong student of Vedanta, senior academic who has been associated with the Vedanta Society for a very long time. You know, her topic is Interfaith Reflections on Sympathy in Religion and Literature. As I mentioned at the beginning, religion in its sublime aspect, not in its exclusivistic fanatical aspect, in its sublime spiritual aspect, has influenced and enriched literature, art, philosophy, music, everything. So I request her to give her presentation. Thank you.
May Brahman protect us. May he nourish us. May we work together with great energy. May our study be vigorous and fruitful. May love and harmony dwell amongst us. Oh, peace, peace, peace. I'm going to give first a brief sketch of my understanding of the term interfaith, touching on my own tradition, Christian Science, and some of its shared beliefs with Vedanta, and then explain by focusing on the lives and work of 4 women, Mary Baker Eddy, Emily Dickinson, Sharda Devi, and Simone Weil, some of what I mean by sympathy in true religion and literature. A power to mitigate what the writer Joseph Conrad called the horror, increasingly confronting us today. So first, an early source of my understanding of the interfaith tradition was gleaned from Aldous Huxley's classic, The Perennial Philosophy. And all the books I mentioned, by the way, are available in the bookstore. This book was first published in 1945. It grew out of Huxley's close association with Swami Prabhavananda, the great teacher at the Hollywood Vedanta Society. When it appeared, it made little sense to the literary critics who missed the satirical edge in many of Huxley's earlier novels. But the book articulates the enormous discovery for the author that all religions have a common basis in direct mystical experience. The experience of oneness between the Supreme Spirit and everyday empirical reality. What Huxley calls a unitive knowledge of the divine ground. Mysticism over the ages embodies the great Upanishadic truth, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, which can mean that the thou each of us is at the same time the that, or infinite Brahman, the eternal cause, the unchanging existence, consciousness, and bliss, or Satchidananda. The perennial philosophy affirms that the transcendent is also immanent, abiding, and that it interpenetrates our conditioned lives. Huxley writes, the spiritual absolute, ineffable in terms of discursive thought, is susceptible of being directly experienced and realized by those who die to self and so make room, as it were, for God. On page after page, he documents records of this unitive knowledge in passages from religious, philosophical, some literary, and other texts from various traditions and times. The poet Kabir declares, for example, Benares is to the east, Mecca to the west. But explore your own heart, for there are both Rama and Allah. And the great English mystic poet and painter of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, William Blake, writes, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. A Zen monk of the 9th century, Huang Po, says, on no account make a distinction between the absolute and the sentient world. This mind of yours is no other than the Buddha, and Buddha is no other than sentient being. And in a Hindu classic we find, like the bee gathering honey from different flowers, the wise person accepts the essence of different scriptures and sees only the good in all religions. Thus, each tradition can help those who are drawn to it to know and draw closer to God. When I first read Huxley's book some years ago, it powerfully confirmed my intuition that I soon found so perfectly stated in the Vedas. Truth is one. Sages call it by different names. I think my particular upbringing in Christian Science and exposure to many great works of art and literature, as well as to nature, helped me respond almost immediately to Vedanta's teachings and to the ideas from different cultures represented in Huxley's book. Christian Science, to me, is one of the universal, timeless teachings. Like Vedanta in a sense, in that it includes ideas that are also found in Sufism, Mahayana Buddhism, and the Kabbalah and Zohar. I will give a thumbnail sketch of its teachings, and first of Mary Baker Eddy's journey of discovery of this eternal divine science. Mary Baker was born on a farm in New Hampshire in 1821, the youngest of 6 children. From childhood, she was spiritually inclined and showed great sympathy for those around her, including the farm animals, and for those less fortunate. As a child, she was often ill, which caused her to miss weeks and even months of school. Besides chronic illness, she early experienced the deaths of loved ones, including her favorite brother, Albert, her first husband after only 6 months of marriage, and then her mother a few years following the birth of Mary's son. This period was part of a grueling 20-year sadhana, a discipline of deprivation and loneliness, which included loss of friends and family support, and failure to find physical relief in the many remedies she sought in allopathy, diet, water cure, homeopathy, and mesmerism. She was learning to rely only on God for her needs. Then, in 1866, she experienced the crucial event which changed the whole course of her life. On a cold February night, she fell on an icy sidewalk in Lynn, Massachusetts, and was carried unconscious into a nearby house. Neither her doctor nor her minister expected her to live. When she regained consciousness, she asked to be left alone with her Bible. She read an account of one of Jesus' teachings and his healings, and experienced a transcendent light and presence that filled the whole room and her whole being. She got up and dressed, writing later, "That short experience included a glimpse of the great fact that I have since tried to make plain to others, namely, life in and of spirit, this life being the sole reality of existence." Perhaps from what I have said, you can imagine my joy and surprise when I read Swami Vivekananda's lectures, such as The Open Secret, The Real and Apparent Man, his discourses on Jnana Yoga, and especially the ones called Practical Vedanta. And then I read Swami Ashokananda's lecture, Spiritualizing Everyday Life, in which he even mentions Christian Science as a most extraordinary creed. And he goes on to describe an interesting experiment he made, which sounds very like the practice of Christian Science. He says, "I made some effort to think in accord with the truth, and I found that it brought results. I won't go so far as to say that I began to see God everywhere, but I will say that if we take a determined stand, this illusion of a material universe has a way of becoming obliterated. It requires a change of vision, a change of attitude. Again and again, our mind will go back to the old way of looking at things. We shall forget that a man is not a man really, but God himself. then we have to bring our mind back to the right attitude. It is, of course, a tremendous struggle. This effort to see from a divine or non-ego perspective can bring with it an ever-widening love that can affect both ourselves and others. I am thinking of Ramakrishna, on whose back appeared welts when someone was being beaten, and who once felt the pain of the grass when it was walked on. Or of Jesus, who was so often moved with compassion for the suffering multitudes who thronged him. Or of Swami Veetamohananda, who wept for India. One of my favorite poems is by William Blake. It's called On Another's Sorrow. The first stanza asks, "Can I see another's sorrow and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief and not seek for kind relief?" And there's a refrain, "No, no, never can it be." Shelley's Prometheus, the god who brought fire to humans, declares, "I wish no living thing to suffer pain." Countless poems and novels and stories give evidence of this existential kindness, a desire to relieve suffering. For example, the English poet William Wordsworth, the great German thinker and writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the French writer Victor Hugo, author of Les Miserables, and many others. Miranda, in Shakespeare's The Tempest, cries out to Prospero, "I suffered with those whom I saw suffer." And King Lear, in A Howling Storm, says to himself, "Expose thyself to feel what wretches feel." Sonia, in Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, Charles Dickens' Esther Summerson in Bleak House, and Amy Dorrit in Little Dorrit, William Faulkner's Isaac McCaslin, are just a few literary characters who live out to a degree the transcendent in the immanent, that true being which necessarily shows as a deep feeling for others, a seeing so true that it spiritualizes the everyday, so that others are uplifted and even transformed by it. Rather than just list more names and book titles, I want to look a little closer at one writer, Emily Dickinson, and 3 of her poems to illustrate some of our theme. First, a short biography. She was born in Amherst, Massachusetts in 1830. She had a good education, and while her family was not wealthy, there was enough that after the parents' deaths, Emily and her sister Lavinia, neither of whom married, lived comfortably in the family home next door to their married brother Austin. After a normally social youth, Dickinson became increasingly solitary, and though the stereotype of her as a reclusive, eccentric spinster persists, it seems more accurate to see her as a type of yogi and mystic. Like Mary Baker Eddy, a fellow New Englander, she needed her solitude to observe, ponder, and write about the realm of the spirit she intuited was within herself and all things, the beyond which is within, to borrow Gerald Hurd's phrase. Though the Bible was a major text for her, the theistic, up there, out there deity was not one she could accept any more than could Mary Baker Eddy. So the first poem is one probably many of you here know. It's could be her most famous, and it's typically humorous in writing about a serious subject, this ego that we have and yet aren't. I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Don't tell. They'd advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog, to tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring bog. But in this poem, she exposes the vanity and the inanity of the universal push to be or feel important that confines us in the persons we work so hard to become and maintain, and that keeps us from the exhilaration of just being. I came across an account by Swami Premananda, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, which is a nice corollary. He said, Sri Ramakrishna did not make us great. He made us nobodies. Wipe out all vanity and all sense of ego. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when the ego dies, all troubles cease. The last poem is one that a number of my students find on their own as they leaf through the book, and it embodies the power of sympathy for all things. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin back to his nest again, I shall not live in vain. The Gita suggests that all of us are capable of this identification. And in this last part of my talk, I'd like to look a little further into this power of sympathy that comes out of spiritualizing everyday life by focusing on Sharda Devi, Ramakrishna's wife, and Simone Weil, whom the French writer André Gide called the most truly spiritual writer of the 20th century. Sharda Devi, an outwardly simple woman who did not have much education and was certainly not worldly wise, had in the words of the Dhammapada, the power of love no army can defeat. How is she able to manifest such power, such love? She grew up in a very religious, not wealthy family in a village in rural India in the mid-19th century, and as was customary then, married at an early age, though she and Ramakrishna did not live together as man and wife in the ordinary sense. Rather, being naturally deeply spiritual, she regarded him as God, and he in turn saw her as the Divine Mother, and carefully prepared her to carry on his mission, which she did for several decades after his passing. To me, Sharda Devi embodies the lines of the Sutta Nipata. Just as a mother with her own life protects her child, her only child, from harm, so within yourself let grow a boundless love for all creatures. Let your love flow outward through the universe to its height, its depth, its broad extent. A limitless love without hatred or enmity. Then as you stand or walk, sit or lie down, strive for this with a one-pointed mind. Your life will bring heaven to earth. I've often tried to think about or imagine how many miles Sarada Devi walked, how many hours she stood listening to Ramakrishna singing and talking to the devotees, how many hours she sat in meditation or at work or listening to those who came to see her, how few hours she lay down to rest or when ill. And all that time she was expressing that love that brings heaven to earth. She was offering consolation and relief to recordless numbers who could not find comfort anywhere else. It helps me to know that she prayed to not see the faults of others, and that prayer was answered. Learn to make the whole world your own, she advised, because, in fact, it is. Utterly different in so many ways from Sarada Devi, Simone Weil, in essence, has much in common with her and with the other women, Mary Baker Eddy and Emily Dickinson, mentioned so far. Simone Weil was born in Paris in 1909 and reared in a warm and pleasant, secular Jewish household. She was a brilliant student, and after graduating from the École Normale Supérieure, went on to various teaching posts until her increasing ill health, her unconventional views about nearly everything, and at last her Jewishness prevented her continuing in that profession. As a student, she was politically and socially active in efforts to help workers and others less privileged than herself. And these efforts continued until her untimely death at age 33, largely from starvation. This was during the war years, and she refused to eat when so many were starving. She lived like a nun, a yogi or mystic, with a driving desire for truth behind all she did. She was deeply drawn to the Catholic Church, but as her letter to a priest spells out, she found herself in too great conflict with many church doctrines to join. Ultimately, she felt a new religion was needed, forged out of the suffering seen in figures like Christ, Antigone, and Prometheus. She had a vision of Christ in 1938, which convinced her of the redemptive power of divine love. It was a presence more personal, more certain, more real than that of a human being. The highest suffering, voluntary, and without consolation, is an uncreating of the self, a removing of the veils of personality that hide the authentic, real self. So she found this eternal religion, this perennial philosophy, in much Greek philosophy and poetry, in folklore, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, in the texts of the Chinese Taoists, certain Buddhist sutras, the surviving sacred writings of ancient Egypt, and those of the greatest Christian mystics, above all, St. John of the Cross. And also in certain heresies, especially in the Cathars and the Manichaean tradition, all of which explore the sacred as inseparable from the transitory. I was first drawn to Weil because of her reading of Greek literature, especially her book, Intimations of Christianity Among the Ancient Greeks. For Weil, Christ is the perfect exemplification of the Buddhist void, a state of being so empty of self, so completely attentive to the divine that the ego disappears. She writes, "The whole effect of the mystic has always been to become such that there is no part left in the soul to say, I." And that's what began to happen to her. Through great effort, she lost what she calls social prestige and became more like Christ, naked and dead in this life, spending herself, as did Mary Baker Eddy and Sharda Devi and many others, in praying and working tirelessly, especially for the outcasts, uprooted and lowly, yearning for some comfort.
Thank you, Ms. Barbara O'Brien, for the wonderful, exhaustive presentation of a very interesting subject. Now, I must say something about spirituality proper. That's what I'm trying to do. Now, what is spirituality? How is it different from religion? As I mentioned at the very beginning, if you read San Francisco Chronicle every day, you are not likely to be a great fan of God or religion. That's a reality. So when we read the Sermon on the Mount or the Bhagavad Gita, maybe Dhammapada, any of the great spiritual literature, we feel, oh, how wonderful. But again, when you read San Francisco Chronicle, you see a different interpretation, different approach, different understanding of God and religion. A mighty, uncompromising creator God sitting above the clouds with a very big stick in his hands, who's looking for those who are very loyal to him, obedient to him, do what he wants them to do. Unfortunately, very often religion has got a bad name these days. But religion is not responsible for that. The founders of religion are not responsible for that. People who pretend to profess religion without actually doing that are responsible for that. In modern times, Swami Vivekananda, historically speaking, and he's the first great teacher who did that in Western world, drew a clear line of demarcation between religion and spirituality. You can be religious and you can be a bloodthirsty, cruel monster. But you cannot be spiritual and be cruel or monstrous or inhuman in your interaction with others. So spirituality is something that goes beyond religion as we understand it, as it is unfortunately understood for the last several centuries. Religion sometimes can become reduced to the status of a prisoner, confined within the four walls of a belief system, a book, a place of worship, and belief, fanatical belief in the exclusiveness and finality of the teachings of the founder of that particular religion. That's the main problem. But true religion has got a lot about it. It could be sublime, it could be unifying, it could make you better human beings, it could make you look upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. It could be unifying. It could make us feel the presence of the divine within us and experience the same divine presence everywhere. Then why there is so much a conflict in the name of religions? You know, normally there are 4 stages that we go through in religious life. At the most primitive stage, we believe my God lives in a temple or a church or any place of worship. He will be very happy if I read that particular scripture, which I may consider to be the embodiment of all the wisdom of God. And certain mechanical rituals which I perform every day or every week in a very mechanical way. And believe in some sort of an intermediary between God and humanity. So priestcraft, place of worship, scripture, and of course the kind of mechanical ritualisms. Now this is not wrong from Vedantic perspective, but this is a kindergarten of religion. You don't begin and end your education at the kindergarten. Your goal is to go to Harvard. Then only you would be considered to be an educated person. And as you grow, as you evolve, as you become more broad-minded, your understanding, your definition of God also evolves and grows. And after some time you may feel, well, even if I can't go to a place or worship or a temple or a church or read a scripture or perform a ritual mechanically, still I can feel the presence of God sitting in my heart by doing good things, by thinking good thoughts, by trying to be a good human being. And at a still higher level, you can feel the presence of God, the invisible presence of God, His hand guiding you, your actions, your thoughts, and your life as a whole. At the highest level, you feel, well, you don't need to go to a temple or a church or a place of worship. You can feel the presence of God in every human being, in everything in this creation. You don't do harm to another person because the other person is not different from you. Physically may be different, but not spiritually. So when you experience the presence of this divine within you and also outside, without, that is called spirituality. One important proof is it makes you a better human being. So that's why Vedanta is often defined as kind of universal spiritual humanism. The problem is, as I mentioned earlier, we pay too much attention to secondary details. So if I read the Bible, I can see wonderful messages teaching us in the parables, in the Sermon on the Mount. If I read Eckhart, I would find many things not different from what I find in the Upanishads, which of course were written thousands of years earlier. And again, when I pray with a sincere heart, as Swamiji was mentioning, with a heart, then if I compare the way I pray with the way with a devout Catholic or a Jewish or Buddhist pray, I won't find it much difference. So at the experience level, when we evolve, when we grow beyond the external rituals, beyond theology, beyond mythology, beyond even philosophy, when we actually feel the presence of God within us and the presence of the God everywhere, it is called spirituality. So if you read, as I mentioned just now, if you read the works of Eckhart and the Upanishads and the Gita, there are many striking similarities. So the point is, we must try to evolve ourselves and go beyond this. You find a similar evolution in the concept of interfaith conversation, interfaith dialogue. At the most primitive stage, exclusivistic approach, exclusivism. My religion is right, my God is okay, your religion is wrong, your religion is devil. It's simple. That makes you worse than an atheist. In fact, it is better to be an atheist than to be a fanatic, because an atheist has some moral principle, what he calls dharma. Atheism, there are very wonderful radical humanists, atheists, agnostics, who are very wonderful people, who appreciate good things everywhere. They may not be willing to believe in a God as we understand or as it is ordinarily understood by the people who don't care for spiritual values. So it's almost like a political dogma. So true religion is not a doctrine. It's not about surrendering our spiritual freedom to an almighty creator God, some kind of a muscular, uncompromising person with a heavy stick in his hand, with a long list of things that you are not expected to do, unless you want to go to hell, and things which you are supposed to do if you want to go to heaven. So, such radical humanists, atheists, and agnostics, not all of them, but quite a good number of them are very good people. So, once you go beyond exclusivism and reach the dialogical approach, you find the foundation of dialogical approach is spirituality. Between these two, there is another approach which is not so very important, called syncretism, where I know in the 70s or 80s, even in Berkeley, I heard there were many liberal-minded Americans who thought Christianity was all bad because nobody goes to churches. So let's all become Buddhists or Vedantics, which is totally wrong from Vedantic perspective. A Vedantic won't accept you if you say Christianity is wrong, I'm going to become a Vedantic. A true Vedantic and a true Hindu will not accept it, because Vedanta is the highest spiritual evolution, the highest fruit of Hindu spiritual evolution. All these great Vedantic teachings that Vivekananda brought to the West in the 19th century were articulated in the ancient Sanskrit works in 8th century by Shankaracharya, who got them all from the Upanishads, which may be 7,000 years old. So, what I mean to say, once we evolve beyond the mechanical level, beyond the level of theology and philosophy, and reach the experience level, then there is no conflict. There is a famous verse, which I don't want to quote too much, but one important verse is that, which is the foundation of interfaith. Mandukya Karya comes. So Siddhanta Vivasthasu Dvaitino Nischidadridham Parasparam Viruddhyante Tairayamna Viruddhyate. It's a very wonderful picture you get here. What the great philosopher Gaudapada says is this: people who believe in this exclusivism, religious exclusivism, is a kind of fanaticism. They fight among themselves, saying, my God is the real God, not your God. If your path is different from mine, it means I am right, you are wrong. This is totally wrong, according to Vedanta, according to the true spirits of Hindu religion. That's what Gaudapada says. So you cannot hurt anyone, you cannot criticize anyone unless you want to criticize yourself. You cannot do any harm to anybody unless you actually want to harm yourself. So that is the approach of Vedanta. Then why do we look upon other religions as alien, different, and distinct, and wrong approaches? Often I use this illustration. You think of climbing a mountain, and your goal is to reach the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain corresponds to experience. At the lower level, there are so many tracks and trails and roads that you can take. If you want to take one road, it's okay, another person can take another trail, another person, it's still innumerable trails leading to the same top of the hill. The top of the hill is spirituality, experience. But when you are following one trail, you believe that I am the only traveler. You don't know that there are other roads which are used by other hikers, travelers, who are struggling to reach the same top of the hill. You realize that there are so many trails which lead to the same top of the hill, so many religions are so many trails which all eventually lead to the top of the hill. You realize this fact only when you reach the top. Because before you reach the top, you have no idea that there can be so many other trails and other passengers, other pilgrims trying to reach the same spot, the experience. So Vedanta says true spirituality is built upon the foundation of experience. So, remember, religion is a creation of human beings, not of God. The teachings of Jesus existed before Jesus. You cannot say the teachings of Jesus were produced, manufactured by Jesus Christ. Truth, a supreme truth, cannot be manufactured. A great truth can be given new interpretation, a new articulation, a new presentation. So all great spiritual teachers of the world are to be accepted and respected and revered with the same respect. Because the great mystics, the founders of great religious traditions, have reached the top of this hill. That is spirituality. This is the foundation of dialogical approach. In dialogical approach, I interact with you, though your religion is different. I discuss with you about God and religion and practices. Not as a concession. All right, you are wrong, still let us have a dialogue, a deal. So no, not in that sense. Your religion is your approach. Wonderful. If you are true, if you are sincere, earnest, lead a pure life, then God doesn't insist that you should, this is my name, you call me by this name, the correct phonetic pronunciation. No. See, the place of residence of God in our hearts, just mentioned earlier. That's why this dialogical approach, which is the foundation of universalism and pluralism in interfaith conversations, is built upon the foundation of spirituality. And that again is based on the fundamental principle that the goal is the same, but paths may be different. Once we take this approach, then religion becomes a harmonizing principle. On the one hand, we are able to feel the presence, experience, not just believe in. Anyone can believe in. Belief only is, in the ordinary sense, it is very superficial. Everyone says, I believe in God. But I would say, if he is sincere, it only means I shall try to believe in God. You don't have to say, I believe in something that you really believe in. You don't say, no, I believe I'm in Olema right now. It's a fact. If you really believe in, you don't make a statement about it. Shankaracharya says, and he says in a very interesting context, what is obvious to you, you don't make a statement about it, and you cannot deny it. So what we call spirituality is the experience of the divine within our hearts and experience of the same divine everywhere, and that makes you a better human being. That experience invokes compassion, kindness, Catholicism, tolerance, acceptance, generosity and broad-mindedness in our interactions with others. So true religion is nothing but trying to become a good human being. A good human being in the most profound universal sense. A good human being is one who looks upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family.
It is a great pleasure to introduce to you these two people who we had the good fortune of hearing their music in a private concert, you could say, in our meditation room here. So I think you'll be very pleased. Their professional names are Naren and Sarada, which emphasizes the spiritual nature of their singing, because Naren refers to Swami Veetamohananda and Sarada refers to Sri Sharda Devi, who was the consort, the wife of Sri Ramakrishna, and who carried on his mission after Sri Ramakrishna had passed away. So this is a very auspicious set of names that they have assumed, and it characterizes their music as well, because it is music that is not only devotional but also interfaith in so many respects, as you will see. Beyond their intention to spread love and joy through music, both live in an ashram near Paris, that is the center from which the Swami Veetamohananda comes. He is the head of that center. It's on the outskirts of Paris in a village called Gretz. At the ashrama, they not only sing, and they also give service. They support the ashrama, and they engage in the study and practice of Vedanta philosophy and meditation. So all of these themes are present in their music, as you will see. And so it is a great pleasure for us to have them here. They have come with the Swami, who is the head of that center. And so the whole impetus behind their singing is spirituality and the spread of spiritual ideas. So please welcome Naren and Sarada. Thank you.
Hello everybody.
Hello.
We are very happy to be with you here in California.
Thank you.
We go regularly to the States, but California, that really is it for us.
Yeah.
We will start with a poem composed by the freedom fighter and poet, the Irish, Brian O'Higgins. This poem is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, in Mary's hands. And you are going to sing with us, because that's what we do. It's not only sitting and watching us. It is sitting, clapping your hands, dancing if you will, and singing with us. The refrain Ave Maria avec, with us.
May Mary's hands, outstretched in strength, keep dangers far away. May Mary's hands, clap close in peace, make sweet peace night and day. Come shine or shower, come we love through days that stretched before. Ave Maria, Maria, Ave Maria, Maria, Ave Maria, Maria, Ave Maria, Maria. Shiva, 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 Maha, 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 Deva, 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 Hara, 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 Shiva, 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 Maha, 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 Deva, 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 Hara, 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 oh, oh, oh. In this wondrous world of thine, violent with toil and with struggle among hurrying crowds, shall I stand before thee face to face, with folded hands, O Lord of all worlds. Shall I stand before thee face to face? Sing with us. Hara, 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 Shiva, Shiva, Shiva,
Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva. And when my work shall be done in this world, O King of Kings, alone and speechless shall I stand before thee face to face. I want you to clap your hands. And sing with us. Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva, Hara Hara Hara, Shiva Shiva Shiva, Maha Maha Maha, Deva Deva Deva. Hara Hara Hara. Whoa, oh, oh.
Thank you very much.